Other scientists of many kinds agree with him, and medicine can find rational explanations for apparently paranormal experiences. Susan Blackmore is a psychologist. As a 19-year-old student at Oxford University, she smoked marijuana. One night she had such an extraordinary experience, she decided to start researching the paranormal, and NDEs in particular.
One night I had a dramatic out-of-the-body experience. For over 2 hours, it seemed to me that I was outside my body, floating around, flying around the roofs of Oxford, looking down on my own body in its college room with my friends, and ultimately became a mystical experience. And that experience made me think, science doesn't understand this at all. And I thought then, mistakenly as it turned out, that parapsychology was the way to answer those questions.
But 20 years' investigation has turned her into a skeptic.
It was an experience of memory and imagination, not an experience of something actually flying over the roofs.
But for many centuries, in many cultures, people have reported these experiences. There is an extraordinary consistency in their stories when describing sights and sensations of entering a new and different existence. In the Doge's Palace in Venice is a picture by the Dutch artist Hieronymus Bosch. It's called Rise into Paradise. Painted in the 16th century, his depiction of the afterlife is surprisingly familiar.
People who are either actually near to death or think they're near to death often report. It involves things like an out-of-body experience, the sensation of moving down a tunnel towards a bright light and perhaps meeting with a being of light.
On the other side of the world, Tibet, where Buddhist beliefs have remained unchanged for centuries. Written over 1,200 years ago, the Tibetan Book of the Dead describes the journey into the afterlife. A gleaming bright light will shine white from the heart of God, with such power that you hardly dare to look into it, and still won't be able to steer your eyes away from it. From ancient Tibet through 16th century Europe to the present day, the light at the end of the tunnel seems to be a universal symbol for life after death. Does science have a way to explain this?
Now, what happens if you are lacking oxygen or you have a severe shock or various other imbalances in the brain is that the inhibitory system gives up first, allowing a massive overstimulation of the whole visual system. And what does this look like? It looks like a bright light in the middle, because there are lots and lots of cells devoted to the middle, fading off towards dark at the outside. And as that effect gets stronger, so the light seems to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until you're rushing towards it, and ultimately it envelops your whole awareness. And that's where the tunnel comes from.
In 1976, Robert Barcher from Germany was 10 years old when he had a terrifying accident. The results have haunted him ever since. He thinks it gave him a glimpse not only of life after death, but also his own particular future.
It
was very difficult to share this experience with others, because it was so hard to put into words. I still find it hard to describe, because there aren't any words to express such a complex experience.
On the 24th of April, Robert and his brother Bruno were playing around in their parents' bathroom.
I was in the bath, and my brother was getting ready by the sink. He grabbed the hairdryer.
Samstags kam damals Ilja Richter mit Disco.
Back then on Saturdays, there was a pop program on television, and Rod Stewart had been on singing I Am Sailing. He was huge at the time, and there were fans blowing wind over the stars that were singing, so I was holding the hairdryer in my face and singing and pretending to be a pop star.
As he danced around, the cable on the hairdryer pulled tight, pulling the hairdryer right out of his hand, and it fell straight into the bath.
It just shook him. His body stretched and sank under the water. I heard his head bang on the bottom of the bath. He kept shaking. He wasn't in charge of any of his movements anymore.
Schüttelte aber weiter in der Wanne. War nicht mehr Herr seiner Bewegung.
Meine einzige Wahl ist loslassen.
My only choice was to let go. And once I did this, I suddenly felt completely relaxed. My mind and body started feeling completely detached.
A
very bright light. I was flooded in light. I felt so comfortable. I didn't want to leave. And I asked for a reason why I should go back. Why do I have to go back there? Then this being, this thing, became very forceful and told me, showed me, that I still had a task to do, that I can't come now.
As a teenager, and still today, Robert is convinced that his near-death experience showed him his future wife and family.
You could say that a vision of a dark-haired woman and 2 children is something that everyone will see at some point in their lives. But this vision went much further than that. It's hard to explain, but in this vision I experienced the same emotions, the same inner feelings that I was to experience later.
Das ist etwas, was ich später dann eben erlebt habe.
But the emotions Robert experienced could have a purely physical explanation. Endorphins. Stored in the brain, these act as neurotransmitters regulating feelings of pleasure. Studies show that in the extreme stress of an accident, the brain fights terror with a strong blast of endorphins.
The pleasant experiences are induced by endorphins. These are the brain's own natural morphine-like chemicals. And there's been at least one case of a man who was having a lovely experience in a heavenly place when he was injected with a morphine antagonist, an injection that would block the effects of these endorphins, and suddenly there were these terrible creatures coming at him, and it turned into a hellish NDE. So if you have a hellish NDE, it's probably simply because of the different way your brain has reacted and whether it's produced enough endorphins or not to make you feel happy.
Whatever the cause, Robert longed to regain that lost feeling of peace. It haunted his mind and became the focus of his life. He wanted to share what he felt was a wonderful experience, but he had to keep it a secret, fearing that no one else would understand.
As a teenager, I was obviously totally overwhelmed by it, and I was worried that if I told people, they would think I'd gone mad.
But the memories became too powerful to ignore. He started to test himself, taking up dangerous sports where death is a real risk. What he wanted was to find again that feeling of freedom from his childhood encounter with death.
I asked myself, are you sure you want to give all this up? The experience then came up in me very strongly, and I thought, yes, I want to find out for myself what this means.
American child psychologist PMH Atwater specializes in children who've had these encounters. It always changes them.
After their experience is over, children invariably are more mature. They become much more adult-like. It's almost as if like they grow up.
Sometimes art can provide much-needed therapy. This painting by a Dutch woman recalls her childhood brush with death. It expresses the intense emotions of her